and welcome to RWA Summit in Dubai. And really appreciate to see so many friendly faces, some new faces, and really appreciate for the great turnaround of the crowd, even considering, a lot of this uncertainty we had in the region in the last months. And also, I know we have some few international guests, so thank you very much for coming. I'm trying to find you now, but really appreciate everybody that showed up. So to kick things off, I have the honor and the pleasure to actually give a small keynote at the beginning to share a little bit more what's happening with tokenization of real-world assets in the UAE. So the focus is on the UAE. And today, I want to share a story that we have done an amazing work in the space of tokenization of real-world assets. We are still very early, fortunately or unfortunately, and we have the opportunity and we have actually the pleasure to be in a country that's a global leader in tokenization of real-world assets. So let's kick things off slowly. I was reflecting together also with my colleagues from RWALabs. What was the pivotal moment for tokenization of real-world assets? I mean, we've been talking about this for quite a long time. Few people who have like gray hair like myself remember this was like going all the way to the times of security tokens. Who remembers that in 2018, right? But I think one of the key moments in this whole ecosystem was actually when the world's biggest asset manager decided to enter this space and tokenize US government bonds, right? And this is the well-known bill product, how you would call it, right? So you can actually buy tokenized US government bonds and have all the benefits from a yield perspective, from a price appreciation perspective, as if you actually buy those products, right? So really a pivotal moment, right? And then we were also reflecting, what does it mean? How do people think about tokenization of real-world assets? Now, of course, you are experts, right? So you know what my next slide will show, probably. But if you're not an expert, what do you think about? You think about, like, stocks, right? You close your eyes, and you imagine oil, like you see barrels of oil, and you think this is tokenization of real-world assets, right? And it kind of is, right? This is our goal. We want to take all of these amazing assets, put them on the blockchain in digital form, and then give access to those products to, ideally, all the people in the world, right? But the reality is like this. So there's a lot of law. There's a lot of regulation, right? That's why we need key people like Irina, like Juliet, right, to do this hard work, at RWALabs, but also within our ecosystem. We need the legal framework. We need the legal matters. Because why do we need that, right? Because if you think about it, I said you're imagining barrels of oil. You're imagining gold, right? And then you get a token. And then you think like, but am I really owning gold, right, when I get this token? Like, what am I actually getting, right? These questions come up very quickly, even if you're a retail investor, but especially if you're an institutional player, right? The first question is, what am I actually getting? What is the safety and security around these products, right? How am I sure what is going to happen if we actually have to dissolve the token? So you create the tokens, now what do you have to dissolve the tokens, right? Why are we doing this? Because the promise is really big, right? So if you read all of these studies by McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, and so on, right? They say trillions and trillions of dollars of assets in digital form will be on the blockchain, right? And people even say like anything that you can imagine or anything that makes sense will be in a digital form on the blockchain, right? So the promise is really big, like the opportunity is really big. That's why we're doing it, right? And the numbers are huge. But then you see, like, we have a long way to grow, right? Because actually the reality is it's still very small. It's still very narrow, right? It's still some amazing use cases, but it's still very small. But, growing rapidly, I think that's the important point, right? Here we're just name dropping, to be honest. This was my contribution to this presentation. I said, like, let's put some strong names to really show that this is not something that a small group of people, like in some corner, is doing, right? These are some really big players coming in. Obviously, it's one step at a time. Safety and security, validating the use case, showing that it works, working together with the regulators, but we are getting there, right? And of course, our amazing kind entities and authorities and also companies here. Now, if you're an expert, you just know what this slide shows, right? Tokenization is actually a complex process. I will not repeat basically what it means, right? What it is here. But you basically need to take an asset, you need to put it in a digital form, it needs to be done under a regulatory framework. And then the most important part, I think, like for the end user, is this at the end, right? we need to distribute these products, right? They need to end in the hands of the right investors, right? First, the right products for the right investors, we need to have distribution, right? So it's a complex process, and there's a lot of work happening actually in the bottom part, let's call it like that, right? And the distribution is still something we have a long way to go, right? Now, the emphasis is, or I'm trying to make an emphasis that UAE is one of the leading countries in the world for tokenization of real-world assets. Now, that can only happen if you have a proactive, innovative, amazing regulatory bodies, right? And that's what we have here in the UAE, right? You might have heard, actually, for instance, in UAE, we had here the first ever direct tokenization of real estate, right? So our kind colleagues, I think maybe I see them from PRIPCO, together with Control Alt, Dubai Land Department, our kind regulator here in Dubai, and a few other players, right? They enabled direct tokenization of real estate. So the token that you own, it's not some SPV, it's not some fund there that you tokenize, it's direct ownership, right? In a fractional form, accessible even to retail at small tickets, right? This is because we have amazing regulators. But at the same time, for all of us who live here in UAE and operate in the region, you know that even the regulatory landscape in UAE is diverse, right? So you can get a license from different regulators. They all have different, let's say, value propositions, right? But it's an amazing regulatory framework that we have here. And I will not actually go into details here, but this is amazing. I already mentioned that we had some amazing use cases, some amazing successes. I see the RWALabs on the right. You know, we also had to say we did something nice. So, but I will actually then focus on our colleagues. I already mentioned PRIPCO, amazing work in the space of tokenization of real-world assets. But, you know, for instance, we have players here like Stake, so it's a bit of a regional player, right? That enables actually people to access amazing products. So we are really leading this charge. We're leading this globally, but still a lot of amazing work for us to go. Now, this is the most important slide, I think, in this presentation. We tried to take the whole ecosystem of tokenization of real-world assets here in the country and put everybody here on this slide. Now, I know all of you are now looking at it and smiling and said, yes, they put me on the, it's amazing, we're a key contributor, and that was the point, right? This is a team effort, right? This is an ecosystem effort. We put everybody here, so you see government and regulators, data providers, regulated broker-dealers. So this is a big, big ecosystem here in the UAE. And again, repeating from my perspective, one of the leading, if not the leading, jurisdictions globally for tokenization of real-world assets. Now, if you are not on this slide, you need to please tell us that you want to get on this slide. We are a pleasure to collaborate with everyone. If you think that if you see that you're on this slide or on this graph, but you don't want to be on it, kindly and quietly tell us maybe later. But I hopefully, I mean, I know Irina and the team and Juliette, they did a really, really great job to put all the relevant players here. And with proudly, this is, I think, perhaps the main slide of this presentation. Yeah. Now, I know you know this, but I will repeat it. So what's the promise of tokenization? First of all, I mean, I come from the exchange space originally, from market making. Even before that, I worked at a hedge fund as a high-frequency trader, as a market maker. So you know one of the big promises of tokenization is actually liquidity, right? So you buy a token, you get exposure to the asset, but ideally you can sell it immediately to someone else, maybe a market maker, but maybe another buyer, right? Someone else. But that ability to get in and out of a product or out of investment, this is one of the key value propositions, right? This is very, very important for institutions, but key for retail investors, right? Because retail investors, this is a part of the regulatory protection, they need to be able to get in and out easily, even with smaller sizes, and do that very efficiently, right? So liquidity, access, right? So the right products, but then for the right people, but ideally everyone. And then obviously something that institutions care about a lot is efficiency, right? They need to have this process done in a very efficient manner. Here you have some technical terms like T+0, like immediate settlement, and so on. But this is why we're doing it, right? This is one ask for, I think, us, RWALabs, but I think the whole ecosystem. A lot of companies approach us and they say, we want to tokenize something, right? And we always tell them, this is an amazing idea, you know, after we hear it, obviously. But you need to reflect, actually, what are you trying to do? under which jurisdictions, and who is the end buyer for that, right? And maybe even like always, you have to have in mind, you have great ideas what you want to tokenize. Please reflect who is going to be the end buyer for that asset, right? We can tokenize everything, but if there's no end buyer, if there's no distribution, if there's no success there, then we're not really achieving the goals. And this is a small ask from the RWA Labs team, but I think from the whole ecosystem as well. Let's really reflect what we're trying to do. We're in one of the leading countries globally. We have an amazing regulatory framework. Remember the slide with the ecosystem? We have all the key players to make it happen, but it's up to you to really rethink what are you trying to tokenize and how are you going to make this a success story. So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to open RWA Summit in Dubai, and I pass the word to my colleagues and enjoy the rest of the day.